You must know the feeling.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I've been hung up on a lot, actually.
For those of you that listen to the Autosport blogs on .com.
The 24 Hours was another good scrap with Peugeot, but you weren't in the ballpark, were you? You were.
No, we were in the ballpark, but too late in the race. There was no test day at Le Mans, and also the first night's qualifying was wet. It was a complete washout. So therefore, when we got into the second night's qualifying, all we had or could do was running for tyre mileages and things like that, the real base work you normally do in the first test day morning. And so we didn't do any setup work, and we missed the setup by a country mile. We just didn't judge it correctly enough. And I think us drivers have got to put our hand up and take some responsibility for that as well. And in the first 12 hours of the race, we were quite slow. And by that time, we had managed to get it sorted out with the things that we could do on the hoof in the race. And from the second half of the race, we were as quick as the lead car within a tenth. So we had the pace. It's just we didn't have it at the beginning, and they had already broken our back by that point and got a gap, and then they were comfortable. And in this type of racing now, you know, go back to Sebring. We won that by 22 seconds. Go back to Petit Le Mans 2008. That was won by 6 seconds after 10 hours. It is nip and tuck. We have got to keep fighting and you know, we've got to pressure them to get an advantage, and they pressure us to get an advantage. But if we're already half a lap, three-quarters of a lap behind, you know, by 12 hours, then they can sit back and relax, and, you know, that's what basically happened, and they won.
I'm glad you reminded me of Petit Le Mans 2008. That was fantastic to watch in the dark when you were hunting down the Peugeots. You'd spun it on the parades going to the grid lap. I'm going to qualify that with something nice, but you still won.
Yes.
You little legend, you.
It's one of those moments that you're not going to sort of speak to your grandkids about, is plumping in the wall on the way to the grid. But, yeah, it just shows how difficult these cars are to drive, shall we say. But, yeah, the fight back from that was something that I think sits as a race. Forget my involvement or Audi's involvement as a race. It probably sits there as one of the best sports car races in the last 15, 20 years because of the fight back. We're 2 laps down, and through very good strategy, through some, I think, reasonable driving on the route, Dindo, Emanuele, Piro and I managed to get into the lead with about 45 minutes to go. But I have to say, overtaking clean in the dark with that GT car sitting there was a risky manoeuvre, but we had to do it. Because if not, I was going to get the bill for the accident damage, and I didn't really want that.
12 months later, not as good a result. We've got to talk about it.
No, you're right.
Because I want to ask you what you said inside your helmet when you
dumped it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to say, fight backs seem to be my speciality at the moment. But yeah, the Petit 2009 was one of those sort of battles as well. The weather was torrential rain. It rained for 17 days solid, to the point where there was huge flooding. And I'm talking about flooding where there was houses washed away. There was people killed. There was about 10 or 12 people killed in the Atlanta area in the week preceding the race, to the point that they weren't sure whether the race was going to happen. But it dried up for a few hours, but not once the race started. That was it. It started to rain again. And we had a lap lead on one Peugeot and was just about to lap the second Peugeot when it dried up. So then we had a big advantage in the wet. They had an advantage in the dry. It all equaled out. And it came to a pace car period where it was starting to rain. And I was over-energetically warming up the tyres to try and keep some tyre temperature, because they were cooling down really quickly and losing pressure. And then the cars are very, very hard to drive at that point. And basically, I just did a loop, a 360 loop, nothing serious, and lost a few positions. And you think I said something bad, but my engineer reminded me afterwards. I just said, sorry about that, chaps, don't worry, we'll get it back.
Really?
But unfortunately, they red flagged the race about 10 minutes later, so we didn't get it back. But some of these, those are points that just remind you it doesn't matter whether you've been racing for 20-odd years, and mistakes still happen, and you've got to sort them out, and you can't allow them to happen again.
You won't make them this year, will you?
No. And
full programme? Sebring, Le Mans, Petit Le Mans?
It's actually quite an exciting programme this year, because we've obviously got the 4th year of the direct head-to-head banging session with our French friends over there. We've got an updated car, and we've understood quite a lot of the reasons that we missed it all in Le Mans. I think that loss as well has fired everybody up quite considerably. You know, it's been quite a good thing, actually, for everybody, a shake, a reminder. And we now have our first race at 1,000 kilometres of Spa, and then we go to Le Mans. That's a part of the preparation for Le Mans, 24 hours. And then afterwards, we're in the Intercontinental Cup, which is a new championship, which is the best races, basically, from the Le Mans Series in Europe, the American Le Mans Series in the States, and also the Asian Le Mans Series. And that starts in September at Silverstone. And so I'm looking for a wee bit of home turf support to get that thing kicked underway.
Absolutely. We'll be there watching you at Silverstone. Why no Sebring?
Sebring has historically been the Le Mans preparation for us, even although it's part of the American Le Mans Series. Even when we were doing the full championship over there, it was a separate crew, separate team, in fact, of engineers, mechanics, everything that ran Sebring, because it's linked to Le Mans. And it was our Le Mans preparation, everything about it linked to Le Mans. And this year, because of the late change of ACO regulations, we basically had to dump quite a lot of our development work and start again, which means that the car's not going to be ready in time for that particular race. We had the option to run an interim car, but one of the competitors basically didn't agree to that. And so we're not in a... Well, one of the competitors didn't agree, and we're not in a position to do anything about it, which is disappointing, because I think the fans, the 180,000 that front up at Sebring, got a titanic battle the last few years and would have had again in 2010. And certainly I look forward to that race in the States, and I also look forward to the next sort of battle. And it just means that I've got another month to wait before I can vent that anger.
You're going to be a busy boy. Let's talk very briefly about Formula One in 2010. You raced in Formula One a few years ago. On paper, we've got a great season coming up, haven't we?
Well, on paper, I think it's a very difficult season to predict. I find it difficult anyway, because we've got such a swap around the regulations now with no refueling. You know, that means that different parameters come into play. For example, fuel economy plays a big part into the amount of fuel a car will use through the race. And that means how much fuel it puts in, which means weight of car. And if you think extra 10 kilos of weight around Barcelona is about 0.4 of a second per lap. So therefore, if you can use 5 kilograms of fuel less than your competitor over the course of a race, you're 0.2 per lap just on that alone, never mind anything else. So, you know, that's a big factor. Obviously, we've had a shift around with drivers, with Jensen jumping from Braun, as it was, across to fight with Lewis at McLaren. McLaren, I think, will be back on stream a little bit. You've got Ferrari with Alonso, which I think is more his natural home, that Latin temperament. The fact he's fluent in Italian as well. Massa coming back to see how he'll be able to return. And I don't think you can forget about Braun, Mercedes, and this bloke called Michael returning.
He's a bit old now, though, isn't he?
He's older than me, so that's okay.
Just? Yeah.
Bench is as good as a mile in the right direction.
Were you surprised he decided to come back?
Yes and no. I was actually surprised that he wanted to come back last year more than this year. But I think once that fire had been reignited by the opportunity and he had driven a car and things, it didn't surprise me. It's a 3-year deal, though, apparently. And that would mean that he's hitting on 44, which would mean that he's the oldest driver, I think, since Fangio to have raced in F1. So, you know, it's a big commitment by him, but he's not taking it lightly, there's no question. He believes he can do it. I think it'll be quite tough for him, because things move on in 3 years. You know, drivers move on, there's new crop coming through. Rosberg, I think, will give him a really good run in qualifying, because we saw Massa give him a run before he finished. You know, I remember Turkey, where Massa out-qualified him and out-raced him, and, you know, there's not many people who have done that in the same team and same car before. And so I think he will find it tough, but I think on the other side of it, I think the other drivers will find it quite tough as well, racing against him.
What about Red Bull?